Well, hello and welcome to this first social media training module. Before we move into specific platform training, I want to talk in this first module about the world of marketing. How it was in the past, how it is now, what's changed, why it's caught everybody out, and what companies are doing to catch up. So really, I suppose the questions are, what is social media and what's all the fuss all about? And to answer those questions, we need to go back and look at the technology. Radio took 38 years to get to 50 million users. TV across the world, 13 years. The internet, 4 years. And the iPod, remember that? 3 years it took to get to 50 million. The iPhone took 2 years. And well, the iPad this year will do 50 million units. Last year it sold 34 million, and that's up 342% in a year. And that's given Apple a market share for the iPad of 74%. And it's reckoned with all the competition now entering the market that that's not going to fall below 50%, which is very impressive indeed. And it's really down to the fact that it does what it says on the tin. It's very intuitive, very tactile, easy to operate and understand, and video looks sensational on it. And that's changing the way we behave. We're loving video on the iPad. It's changing the way that we view television. We're using the iPlayer and other download platforms more and more to watch our television, not at the point of live play, I might add, but actually on time shift consumption. And it's actually changing the peak time from viewing, suggested that actually no longer will the peak time for viewing be sort of 8 o'clock at night when a soap opera is on. It's more going to be when we go to bed, take the iPad with us and actually watch something off the iPlayer at a time to suit us. So it's fundamentally changing our behaviour. And that's going to have real implications for businesses when you think about it, because using video in our businesses is a very powerful tool. It's great for search engine optimization, to get visible on Google. Google loves video. Well, it owns YouTube for a start, so that helps. But having video for your business gets you greater visibility, and nowadays is not difficult to do for yourself or even to have someone do for you. It's not an expensive option anymore. But the iPad wasn't the only device enjoying success in 2011 and into 12. The Kindle, of course, sales up 177% in the last 9 weeks of 2011. They were selling 1 million a week up to Christmas last year. My wife determined to carry on reading books staunchly because they were the last great bastion of our society. But of course, when she had the Kindle and she realised its convenience and its fact that it can work so well in the sun, she was hooked and has loved it ever since. And that's really the story with these devices. Consumers are loving the devices, they understand them, they find them easy to use, so they're moving away from traditional media and embracing smartphones and tablets. Industries like the newspaper industry finding this very difficult to deal with. But it's giving us exciting new tools to interact with. Apps, something that didn't exist just a few years ago. Mobile web, QR codes. So in 2 years, the tablet has transformed our online habits. New technologies essentially then are rising from nowhere and changing entire industries. So as businesses, we have to be flexible. I was mentioning that these devices are changing our behaviours, and smartphone users. Visits to stores down 20% in 9 months. So increasingly consumers are searching out the most convenient channel for browsing and purchasing. There's some extraordinary facts around smartphones. 4.8 billion of us now have one, and yet only 4.2 billion of us own a toothbrush, which is kind of concerning, really. 51% of the UK now has a smartphone. We've just passed in June of 2012 the tipping point, if you like, whereby as the 2-year renewals for contracts came round, people began to upgrade, and therefore we passed the halfway point where more people in the UK now have a smartphone than don't. Interestingly, as a result of that, 54% have now used their phone to go shopping, and 38% of those people have actually completed purchases. So you may have heard of these QR codes, you might have seen them if you haven't heard the name. And are they the ultimate traffic generator because really what we want to do is to get people to take a look at our website, because that's where everything is listed about us. That's where all the information is that we want consumers to find about us. And this little device, if you scan that code, barcode I suppose you'd call it really, with your mobile phone, it'll take you to what's called a landing page, which is a specific page within a website that gives you the information that you wish the consumer to find. So there's the code generated on the internet. There are plenty of sites that can do that for you. And there is a mobile phone scanning that image, and it will take you ultimately through to a landing page which looks a little like that. That's actually the landing page for that particular QR code, and it's telling people that scan it that there is a travel fair on the 3rd of March and there is a competition that they can enter at a particular venue. So you can see that's a very simple way to get people who might be out in the street consuming analog media to get onto a digital platform to find information that is of sales benefit to your organisation. How's that all possible? Well, changes in the web, essentially. You've probably heard the phrase Web 2.0, and that really is just a clever term to describe the changes in the internet. Originally, of course, set up to share documents and connect computers around the world. However, of course, nowadays, the internet is an interactive tool whereby with Skype and social media platforms we can actually communicate with each other through the web, and therefore Web 2.0 is essentially the opportunity for us to connect and build social networks around the world, as opposed to a simple device for sharing documents. And that's created a new way to market. The old way, as we'll look at in a moment, we used to target people and then convince them by deluging them with marketing, which we got increasingly annoyed about and then found time and devices to avoid it. But of course now, having gone through many years of interruptive marketing, we're now moving to a world of interactive marketing, using human engagement to drive preference and loyalty. If you want to see a physical manifestation of that, you need to look no further than your local phone book. Here's mine, for 3 towns in fact, and that includes the business, classifieds and residential numbers. And look how thin it is. A very visual manifestation of how the world has changed in terms of marketing and advertising. But it doesn't mean that just because you are using an online platform that you should forget the analog, the old way of doing things. Social media really is an addition to complement your existing marketing, not to replace it. Here we find Nestlé using a traditional poster site in a motorway services to advertise new brands or new flavours of a brand, Kit Kat, to an audience, and asking them to engage on Facebook to tell them which one they like the best. Now it's interesting that I don't subscribe to the Kit Kat page on Facebook. However, I did come across this advert and found it an interesting example of how digital and analog marketing are combining to provide a real comprehensive campaign to catch potential consumers for this particular brand of chocolate. I have to say, it did raise quite an eyebrow when I pulled out my mobile phone to take a photograph of that in the gents' toilets on the motorway services, but luckily it was only for a brief moment. So the world is changing forever, and that's never more true than in marketing. As I said earlier, marketing used to be about interrupting and yelling about products that people were rarely interested in. But the truth is, if you yelled enough, you got a return on your investment. But small businesses didn't like this because, well, they couldn't afford to yell as much, in truth. They didn't have the budgets. Let's take the example of a local furniture retailer. Somebody who perhaps has advertised for many years, half page, in a local newspaper, and has done very nicely. Along comes a national chain, buys a wraparound on the front of the paper for the first month, and then has a full page and a front page masthead, let's just say, for the rest of the year. Just because they have the buying power to spend that kind of money on marketing, it's an unlevel playing field on behalf of the small business in the town. And that's frustrating for a local retailer. But of course, in the new world, as we'll see in a moment, that doesn't exist anymore. That disparity isn't there. So it's suggested that the birth of social media went back to 9/11. Customers paid less and less attention to all of this interruptive marketing, of course, and eventually they had the technology to avoid this particular type of marketing. The TiVo box, the Sky box, managed to give us good ad avoidance, which is a big problem for traditional media nowadays. But after 9/11, people didn't know who to trust anymore. They thought, not in my backyard, surely. It was a big shock, particularly to the American community. But they did turn to their local community for peer recommendation. At the same time, increasingly big brands began to let us down as we went through the noughties. These particular brands, of course, synonymous in quality in many cases, actually began to have product recalls or major disasters and problems, which led to us really thinking, well, if we can't trust them, who can we trust? And so we turned to the only people that we knew that we could trust, friends and family and our local networks and communities. And so the social consumer was born. And who is the social consumer? Well, someone like you and me, really, inquiring, comparing, broadcasting and knowing their rights. Someone who knows how to get what they want because the customer is always right. So it turns out that it's all about being socially responsible and acting with integrity. I mentioned the news of the world a moment ago, and this is perhaps the first example of the power of Twitter. We've seen many recently with the Arab Spring and developments in the Middle East and the core role that Twitter in particular played in that process. Well, here's probably the first, and I still think one of the most extraordinary examples. A lady called Melissa Harrison, known as the Z Factor on Twitter. Local journalist who was a little miffed at the way her contemporaries were bringing her profession into disrepute. So she mentioned on Twitter that she'd had enough and she'd like to somehow teach the paper a lesson by getting people not to buy it this coming Sunday. A number of people joined in the conversation and basically suggested that actually it would be far better to hit the paper where it hurts and actually get the advertisers to stop spending money with the paper, and that way they would be forced to close. She obviously replied saying that she didn't understand or know who the people were who would be making those decisions. But of course, what she wasn't aware of was that Ford, one of the biggest advertisers in the newspaper, was already monitoring the conversation on social media, engaging with an audience, and actually getting the groundswell of opinion firsthand as it happened. They realised the strength of this and pulled their advertising. And of course, once, as anyone working in media sales will know, once the biggest advertiser pulls, it's a very quick succession. It's in very quick succession that others follow suit. And of course, the rest then was really history. Now, social media, Twitter in this instance, and just a few consumers managed to bring down an organisation that had seen some pretty interesting scrapes in its 130-year history. And there at the bottom you can see a Channel 4 news source tweet. Big car manufacturer about to pull its advertising from News of the World. Details here shortly. So you can see the kind of information that's being shared and the consumer power that gives us. So the internet makes it easier to follow and connect with the people we want. In effect, we can create our own channel for advertising and marketing. So the future of marketing, therefore, is all about leadership. To meet the social consumer, we have to become a social organisation. And if an organisation does something that affects people, then they will connect and a community will grow. Small organisations benefit in this instance because they're run by people, not committees. And people by people, people want to connect with people. They don't wish to connect with a logo or a big organisation because they seem large and faceless on these new platforms. It's one of the reasons why Steve Jobs was very much visible at the top of Apple as a particular face for people to connect with. and therefore it becomes a level playing field. Everyone's social media profiles are the same size. You can't have a bigger Facebook page because you're a national chain, or a small furniture retailer in the local neighbourhood. So the challenge is that we have to become a social business to meet the challenges of the social customer. We have to be aware that consumers are sophisticated. We have to understand how and why they choose to buy from us. We have to understand their needs better than ever. And we have to ensure we present ourselves to them in the right place and in the right way. So we have to be structured as well to deliver their needs whenever they see fit. Much of this was true in the past, but it's more so now. If they decide to order at 3 o'clock in the morning, we have to be there to give them good customer service as soon as we physically can. A report from Deloitte recently into the role of social media in marketing suggested that businesses will need to take a much more active role in shaping the conversation with consumers. Those that do will, in all likelihood, be best positioned to seize opportunities in the future. Here's an interesting graph that shows where we spend our attention and where companies spend their advertising. The blue is where we spend our attention. So 7% of our time is spent consuming print advertising. And yet companies still invest 25% of their budget in print marketing. Interestingly, we're still consuming quite a bit of radio, 15%, but only 11% spend their advertising money on radio. TV is pretty much neck and neck. The internet, again, there's a disparity between where we spend our time looking and the amount of spend in our budgets. But on mobile advertising, surely everyone can see the opportunity there to get our unfair share of the cake. 10% of our time spent consuming mobile advertising, yet it only accounts for 1% of a company's budget typically. Customers do not want a relationship with your business. They want the benefits a relationship can offer them. Nobody cares about your products, features and benefits. People care about their problems. So in other words, the way we market our products now is to show how they solve a particular problem for the customer. Very interesting, subtle, but fundamental way in which we now change the way we market. So how can social media help grow our business? Well, for a start, you have to be there on the platforms where potential customers will already be talking. It has to be relevant what we're saying. We have to provide useful information to local businesses keen on networking to build their business. We have to be proven. We have to show ourselves as real people, use testimonials to show how our expertise works. This is the real area of difficulty for some people. It's very un-British to sit there and talk about our successes and our achievements and our expertise. But this is the way that people want to know whether we're any good at what we do. We have to use testimonials because that allows others to say how good we are on our behalf. And I would suggest that if you haven't got testimonials in recent weeks and months, that you should really focus on getting people to say how good the service is that you provide. They're worth their weight in gold and extremely valuable. Give potential clients a reason to connect and develop a conversation. People aren't just going to follow you because you sell something they might want. They're going to want to know that they have a way of getting inside information, interesting information about the product or service that you provide by connecting with you in this way. What's in it for them, in truth? But this does give you an opportunity to keep in touch with customers, both new and existing. Gives you an opportunity to upsell, maybe with training, or suggest new opportunities, trial new products. The opportunity for engagement is endless. I know, for example, that one particular coffee company regularly now advertises new flavours of coffees available on trial at certain branches at certain times by their Facebook page, and ladies or gentlemen that latte who would like to go and try these new flavours are invited to go along at specific times and days, and that gives them free product testing, which they would have had to have paid focus groups a great deal of money for in the past. So how do we create communities? Well, we have to create an online presence that communicates your aims, aspirations, values and mission. It's important that you know what you stand for when you open these accounts and start to post information. Make sure these values are consistent across all the platforms that you invest in. Manage your content, update it regularly and ensure it's focused to the interests of your target community. Make sure there's something in it for them. Give your target community a reason to connect. Just because you're selling something isn't good enough reason for them to want to connect with you. Build your following by connecting with those with similar interests or fit your target profile. Be clear on who it is you want to connect to and you want to engage with. Understand who your customer is. Identify your customer target market. Tell your community everything, what's going on in the business, the highs and the lows. People want to know that you're real. People buy people. Connect, communicate, engage, and give and gain. Something that Ivan Meisner, the founder of BNI, talks about. If you give, then you will receive back. We are now in the business, therefore, of winning hearts and minds, and not necessarily marketing. Future customers don't want to be your new best friend. Social media is a great competitive intelligence tool which cuts both ways. It's perhaps a little uncomfortable for some business people to think about the fact that their competitors might be following them on a social media platform. But in truth, that gives you the opportunity to see what they're up to as it does for them to see what you're doing. One of the concerns that businesses have is the fact that they may lose customers to another competitor who happens to have inside information about the sort of work that they're doing. The truth of the matter is that if you're looking after the customer correctly and engaging properly with the customer won't leave you in the first place, no matter what your competitors do. So perhaps the first thing to do is to look at who your customers are and how you're looking after them, and then confident in the knowledge that they will be happy with the service they're receiving, you can then engage with your competitors, and that tool of having that intelligence cutting both ways can be a very useful device. Social media is a good tool in sales preparation. If you Google the company or the person that you're going to see, your prospect, then you will find a great deal of information about that prospect online. And this, of course, is great in preparing your sales preparation, and also in terms of finding something perhaps that you can talk about on a social level, something that they may be interested in, a hobby maybe that you found details of online, and that will give you an opportunity to break the ice and build rapport when you go into your sales meeting. Sales remains the most social part of the business. That hasn't changed and never will. Ultimately, all of this networking that we do in the virtual world comes down to a physical relationship in terms of meeting with the customer and signing agreements. Don't assume everybody else is social. Just because you're on these platforms doesn't mean to say everybody else is, and that supports the theory that we said earlier about the fact that we still have to engage with traditional marketing as well as online marketing. They complement each other. They don't replace one another. More channels does not mean more talk. Very important, really. Just because you have several channels to use, it doesn't mean that you have to create loads of quantity. It's all about quality. Social media management shouldn't be confused with community management. Managing your social media sites is not the same as community management. Community management is about recognizing and understanding who the people are you're talking to, getting to know them to a point where you could actually network for them within that community, introducing people to others within that community who may be of mutual benefit to each other. And that comes back to the giver's gain principle. When you put two people in contact with each other in that way, and they benefit, then they will feel the need to repay you and reward you in some way. Social media is not free. Yes, signing in to an account is technically free, but of course this takes your time, and your time is valuable. Social media is not a sales silver bullet. Just because you open a Twitter account doesn't mean to say that you'll be inundated with orders within the first month. An opportunity it is not to control your message. This is not where you can go onto one of these accounts and start telling people what you think, how it is. This is about engagement and understanding the customer and their needs. It's not an opportunity to tell everyone what you think. Setting up a Facebook page will not magically produce results overnight. And it's not an alternative to clear messaging and mission. You have to be clear what your proposition is to your customer, whether you're using social media or not. And that remains just the same when you open new online accounts. Social media works best, as we've said, when integrated with other marketing plans. There's little point unless you regularly update your website and platforms and you listen to your community. This isn't just about posting information and then forgetting about it. This is about seeing what comments come back, trying to pose good open questioning so people feel the need and the permission, if you like, to come back and comment on what you've said. Post relevant and interesting content. What is of interest to your potential customer? Do you know? If not, find out. But ask yourself, most importantly, what will I have to stop doing to make way for all this new activity? We're all busy enough running our businesses, let alone having to be a marketing director as well in the company. Part of this course will cover how we can work smarter rather than harder at doing this stuff, and there are ways that we can utilise our time more effectively using certain free tools that are available to people for social media activity. But you're still going to have to find a way of working this into your day. Typically, I would suggest that 15 to 20 minutes a day would be the sort of amount of time that you would need to find to cover off this kind of activity properly. But also, if you're in an organisation of more than one person, who has the drive and determination to see this stuff through for you? Is it going to be you, or would it be somebody else in the company? If this is something that doesn't really set you alight and you don't really see the opportunities and the possibilities, then is there someone else in the company who really gets this? And it doesn't necessarily have to be the youngest person in the organisation. All too often, people think about, oh, we'll give it to the receptionist, the most junior person in the organisation to do, because it doesn't really matter, and as long as we get it done, that's fine. But in truth, would you entrust your sales process to the most junior person in the organisation? The job that your sales director does, would you entrust that to the person who is the most junior in the company? Because that's essentially what you're doing if you take that approach. Because this will be driving sales through engagement, and it's important that the job is given the responsibility, but it's also given to somebody who understands this and is naturally gregarious and social in the way that they approach business. One word of warning though: if your current activities are inefficient or not working, and you don't know why, don't lay out more on top. It's like putting a plaster over a broken arm. What you don't want to do is to have a website where you have no traffic and no interactivity, no engagement, and then you open a social media account, because that's not going to solve your problems. Your problems are far more fundamental. Considerations. Well, any strategy for this stuff should have 4 main elements. You need to think about the content, as we've mentioned, sharing interesting material, local news, tips. And you need to retweet other people's information, which we'll talk about when we move on to Twitter. The question is, where's all this content going to come from? Well, I'm going to show you at the end of this session here. Think about who you're connecting to. How am I going to build a community of followers? Who would they be? And on what platforms? Would that be on Twitter, LinkedIn, and possibly Facebook? And will they be different on all 3? Or is it one specific type of person that we're looking for? Think about the conversations, not just about sharing the stuff you find and the stuff that's of interest. It's about having the open questioning and the engagement afterwards. Through all of this, you'll highlight your activity and you'll highlight your expertise and your knowledge on a subject area, and you'll also show yourself as caring in terms of customer service and attention. A call to action. Knowing about the end game here is very important too. Sharing content and conversations is all very well, but what are we doing this for? You need to know what the end game is. Very important. Is this to drive sales? Is this just to show that you've got great customer relations within the organisation and you care on after sales? Is this about upselling with training, etc.? Know what the end game is. I'm sure you're aware of the 5 relationship levels in building a relationship with a potential customer. First off, we start out with identifying who those customers might be, so our target market. And this typically might be where we would be looking at people as potential customers on LinkedIn, for example, or maybe on Twitter. And then we would engage at level 2. That's where a conversation, virtually or online, doesn't really matter. Virtually online or physically doesn't really matter. But that's where engagement begins. But at this time, of course, you're both skirting around each other, and recommendation is unlikely at this time. Level 3, it's all about strengthening that relationship. This is a conscious decision then to build the relationship further. Maybe an invitation to meet up, and the relationship becomes more tangible at this stage. An opportunity to talk about the possibility of working together, maybe. And then when collaboration starts at level 4, this is when trust builds to the point of the first contract, the first time to work together. And then as that work continues, hopefully then the customer moves on to the inner circle, level 5, where you're regularly working together and indeed passing referrals to each other. And this is where professional relationships often move into personal friendships, of course. So if we look at those 5 relationship levels in terms of the social media platforms, the identification process, level 1, starts really on LinkedIn and Twitter. They're the best platforms to identify local business and customer connections. And then when we engage on level 2, we follow them on both platforms and start a conversation. Level 3, we strengthen that conversation, and we might be connecting with them and sending them personal emails, or in-mails as they're called on LinkedIn. We might be direct mailing them on Twitter. And we might even get to a stage where we're in LinkedIn groups with them, sharing a group. And we might even get to the point of picking up the phone or chatting other networking opportunities. We might meet them virtually on a networking group, or we might actually meet them at a physical networking group in the real world. Level 4 is all about the collaboration. At this point, the target is in regular contact, having seen the benefits outlined and highlighted virtually and physically by you. This is where all of the information posting, the content posting, and the illustration of the expertise that you have is so important, because the potential customer will have been looking at all of that information through levels 1, 2 and 3, and will have seen that you know your stuff, that you know your subject, that you're competent in the core skills that you profess to have, and that the product stacks up and it works well, and that other people think it's very good. They will have seen that information, and they will now know that it's okay for them to go ahead and collaborate with you at level 4. And then, of course, they move into the inner circle at level 5 and become core clients. So I would suggest that you draw a little grid like this and think about and consider who your current level 5 inner core are. Who are your evangelists? Who are your potential evangelists? Who are at level 4 and likely to move up? Level 5 being the people that have had fantastic experience with you, regularly work with you, have given you testimonials, are happy to give testimonials to others. Who are at level 4 about to give you a testimonial and could move on to being level 5? What do you do to move them to level 5? But also using these networks and looking at their followings, find out who it is that they talk to, because if they're happy to recommend you, they're happy to talk to their community about you too. But also look at who talks to them, who do they have the interactions with, follow those people, target those people, because if they can give you a third-party referral, that would be very strong. What else do they talk about, and what are their triggers to talk? And more importantly, of course, via testimonial, what do we want them to talk about us, and how do we get that to happen? So, in truth, we no longer search for the news finds us. And that's through 60 million daily Facebook updates, 140 million daily tweets, and 200 million blogs. There is a lot of noise and spam out there, and the truth is that we have to produce good content to be visible. A good example of this is in the charity industry, and how they've changed the message, and this is where social media is perhaps best illustrated. So in the old days, when we did interactive marketing, we'd say, have you heard that we need money? We need money, send us money. And that cycle would go through with interruptive marketing throughout. Now, it's much more engaging. Here's the story of what we do, how what we do affects you. Send us money, and here's the results of how the money helped. You can see this particularly on some of the charity television programs that are broadcast nowadays, how the money has been spent videos, very moving, but very reassuring that the process is working and that the benefits are there for those that need that help. So the new way of content marketing, if you like, being used to highlight the successes that your donations have made provides compelling stories and reasons to create conversations and motivate a change in people. So the guiding principles we should look for really are to firstly listen closely. One of the first things I'm going to do when we talk about Twitter is to get you to log on to Twitter and then do nothing. Just watch and listen. Because before you talk, you need to engage and listen closely. Always pause and think before you hit that reply button, and always be responsible. Don't be tempted after the third glass of wine on a Friday night to express your view on something that might be happening on the television. It's all too easy to do, but it can also ruin your reputation. The most important message from this first unit, really, this first module, is not to sell, sell, sell. When you get onto these platforms, don't be tempted to think, right, I've set these up, they're going to have to pay as quickly as possible, and then start shouting about how wonderful your products are. That will not work for you. It's all about engagement, not about interruption. Always say who you are, be yourself, show your personality, but have a thick skin in case somebody has a go. Not likely in many cases, but you have to be very wary of the fact that sometimes that can happen. Respond to ideas, not to people, but respond promptly. So if somebody says something, don't have a go at the person, but if somebody puts an idea up there, it's much more positive to respond to ideas than to people. Know your facts and cite your sources at all times, and stay on record. Coordination and consistency is vital. This is more important if there's more than one of you sharing the responsibilities of communicating with your audience. It's important that people know, and there's consistency and coordination between your efforts. So you have to communicate internally and raise even the minor concerns with each other. If you respond to a problem, then you must own it. You don't palm it off on somebody else to finish off. You make sure you see the problem through to the end. Denial, wool pulling and hole digging just aren't worth it. It's always worthwhile in those circumstances to, when somebody has a pop, to take the conversation offline at the earliest possible opportunity, take it off of a social network and get it onto an email or a phone conversation so that it becomes no longer visible. That's always the best way to deal with those situations. But when you have the negative publicity, it's also an opportunity to win back trust. Many companies now dealing with things like TripAdvisor, for example, whereby somebody might post a negative review of your hotel or guest house. And of course, many businesses find this particularly annoying, particularly as some of the posts, in their view, aren't fair and at best one-sided. But there's a great opportunity here for you to respond as a business and to apologise for the way that they felt about this, and to take the conversation offline and deal with it in a positive and helpful manner, because that shows that you're keen as a business to recognise that sometimes things go wrong and that you're happy to help and put it right at the earliest possible convenience. And that gives other people a feeling of reassurance that you'll try and deal with their problems as and when they occur. Far better to do that than have posts put up online that you're not aware of because you're not monitoring the situation, and then people will see all the comments that have been posted about your business in a negative manner, and the fact that you haven't had any decency to come back and respond, just simply because you weren't aware they were there in the first place, suggests that you don't care. So the 5 golden rules: listen, be interested, engage, be interesting, be real, it's all about honesty, be respectful, act with integrity, and have fun. After all, it is social media. So where do we start? Well, the suggestion is we start with your website. As I said at the beginning, it's all about getting hits on the website, it's getting traffic to your website. And we use these platforms around the edge as a satellite, really, or a series of satellites to bring traffic into the website. We use those platforms as an opportunity to tell people what's going on the website and to come in and have a look. So that's the way we would build our strategy using these tools. We don't want to make LinkedIn or YouTube or Twitter or Facebook in particular replace our website. We want them to attract people to our website, and that's really the strategy that we want to adopt with social media. If you've ever wondered what the worst website in the world ever was, well, there is a lot of conjecture online about what the worst website ever was, but this has got a lot of votes and certainly gets my vote, just because it is quite extraordinary. This is a website that you'll be pleased to see is no longer online, but this is the Accept Jesus Forever Forgiven website. You'll see that randomly there are some arches along the bottom of the page. There is a ladder with a pot of paint on the left-hand side. There is a cat running out of the door frame, which is chasing a bird up in the sky. Why they're there, nobody really knows. The colours in the background morphed around, almost inducing a heart attack, I would suggest, and there was hold music that you couldn't turn off. But interestingly, if you managed to stay on the website for more than 30 seconds, a little box popped up which said that you'd received a virus from Microsoft, but not to worry, that the Lord would absolve you of the virus and clear it for you. But that, in essence, is, I would suggest, how many websites still look, in the sense that they are one-page documents or several pages that are never changed, set up as statements of fact or intent, and once they've been read, there is no reason for the visitor to come back and take another look. Contrast that with a good Web 2.0 website, one for a local business I know well, which is an accountancy firm. And this company has a modest price website, but it has so much engagement. It's acknowledged that the I starts top left on a web page, reads to middle right, and then over to bottom left. So we have the company name at the top, the big cheese on the left, on the right, and then on the left, happy clients. So that's a pretty positive start. But if you then look on the right-hand side at the bottom, all those resources, podcasts, presentations, webinars, tax tips, simple stuff that works, it's all there. I could spend a good half an hour engaging with all of that information to start with. And then in the middle column, every member of staff is encouraged to blog. So there's plenty of information that's relevant to the business of accountancy and to business management. Do you pay yourself dividends? Why do we procrastinate? Small business training needs. All of this stuff there for me to engage with. And of course this updates on a regular basis. As you can see there, posts, 3 posts within a matter of 10 days or so. So there are plenty of reasons to come back to this website and engage. And of course it just says something about the way that this company goes about its business. It supports its clients. It's there with its clients. It's not just going to be contacting you when it's time to do a tax return. They're going to be giving you contact through the year to try and engage you, to give you information that's going to be of use to your business for free, but also in the hope that you'll at some point need their services more than just a simple tax return. I mentioned Googling yourself earlier on, and it's important because these social media platforms will give you greater visibility on Google once you set them up. Here's a good example of this, looking at my own particular company, my website at the top, having Google pull out immediately. You'd expect that, of course, but you can see some of the blog items and articles posted there underneath. But also, you'll also notice my LinkedIn profile for the business and for my personal profile. Listed there, and then also Facebook below that. And if we could see further down, you'll see Twitter and various other sites that I have platforms on. They are also listed in Google, and they do get great visibility. And of course that's very important when we consider the percentages that are clicked on in the different positions on Google. We all say we want to be on the first page of Google, but clearly there is a preference for being as high up the list as possible, because 42% of people will click on the first item underneath the paid for ads at the top, the sponsored links. Clearly those sponsored links must work, but I've never yet met anybody who actually clicks on them. But you can see 42% for the first, 12 for the second, and 9 for the third, clearly getting into that top half of the searches on page 1 is where we really want to be. Interestingly, if you ever do pay-per-click advertising, the advertising across the top and down the right-hand side, it's often better to be in position 4 or 5 in that right-hand column than being number 1, simply because as we go down the main searches on the left side, the free searches, we often go down to sort of 3rd or 4th position and then cast the eye across to the right and look at the 4th or 5th position there. And of course, if you know anything about pay-per-click advertising, you'll know that the people who are paying 4th or 5th position aren't as paying as much as the people in 1st position. So often the trick is to get yourself in those lower positions to get the benefit of some clever strategy, I would suggest. In looking at opening these new accounts, we have to think about what we're going to call ourselves. And here's the back of my business card, which talks about, or shows people rather, the URLs that I've created for my accounts. Each one has the same ending so that people know where they can find me. There's a kind of plan to how I've set those out. If it's Facebook, it's always ending in Paul Allen Media. If it's Twitter, it's always got Paul Allen Media, and so on. So it's important that you think about consistency and that the names of your accounts are consistent across all platforms. Well, how do you do that? Well, here's a great little win for you. www.namecheck.com. NAMECHK.com. www.namecheck.com. As you can see on the page there, type in a name and it'll not only show you the available domains at the top, but it'll also show you all those social media sites that either are available or not available, as the case may be. Very useful little tool and very handy when setting up a company profile on a social media site or indeed on a web domain. Very useful. One of the things I'm going to suggest to you to do, a little bit of homework from this first session if you like, is the need to open a Gmail account. Now, this is a Google Mail account, and if you just Google Gmail, it'll take you to a page like this where you can create an account. Why are we doing this? Well, you'll notice that when you start to open your new social media platform accounts, that you'll get sent plenty of email notifications of who's engaging with you, who's following you, who's not following you, information about the groups on LinkedIn, etc. And you'll be deluged with emails, many of which you will not necessarily want to be looking at. So what I suggest you do is you separate out that information from your business information, because if you give your business email address, you'll find it hard to pick out the actual emails you want for business from all of this other stuff that's going to be sent to you. So I tend to set up a Gmail account in the name of my business so that I can get all of that email into that particular account, and then when I want to do my social media activity, I go into my Gmail account and look at the emails that are relevant to my particular platforms. So the Gmail account, very simple to open. Just click on create an account and off you go. Or if you already have a Gmail account, then start to use that account for your social media login activity. Google has actually over 500 business tools available. Quite an extraordinary resource, and not many people realise. There are a number that I think are relevant for you to take a look at in terms of your social media activity and your business activity. Google Places, as was, Google Local is very much the opportunity to put those little red markers on the map to show where you are. If you're based in a location particularly, very useful, and obviously those local locations are given preferential treatment in terms of visibility on a Google search in a particular area. Google Reader is a RSS web reader, which we're going to talk about in a moment, so I won't try and confuse the issue by trying to explain it now. And Google Alerts gives us information on the web that's relevant to the particular topics that we're interested in finding out about. Again, more about that in just a moment. Google Plus, you may have heard of this. This is a very Facebook-style social network. Again, lots of people registered, but there doesn't seem to be much enthusiasm activity down the road, and certainly it wouldn't be one of my recommended platforms to spend my time on, given that we're running a business at the same time. The platforms that we're recommending that we look at really are Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Pinterest and YouTube. Google Chrome is the web browser that I regularly use. Certainly one of the fastest growing web browsers. Very, very clever little device and well recommended. Google Analytics is obviously the tool that we use to monitor, or a free tool that Google provides us to monitor traffic to our website. It does a lot more than that, but again, that's not really something that we're covering in this particular area of tuition. So we'll pass on that, but well worth having in the back of your website if not already there. Google AdWords and Google Keyword Tool, again, great opportunities to find out what it is with these two tools, what it is that people are typing into Google to find your products and services. But again, I'm going to go into that in more detail in just a moment, so we'll move on. So the first thing you need to do is to set up a listening post, because if we're going to be telling people and giving people content, telling people about what it is that we're interested in, products and services and themes related to what it is that we do, then we need to find information. And surely we can't be expected to go all around the internet and find information for us to broadcast out. Well, no, that would be ridiculous. We haven't got enough time to do that. So it's great that there is a tool that will go and find that information for us and bring it into one place that we can then read it, one particular piece of software where we can read all of that information. So we need to set up Google Reader. And Google Reader is basically an RSS reader. So what is an RSS reader? Well, RSS stands for Really Simple Syndication, and you've probably recognized it, you've not probably heard of it, but you'll recognize it by the logo at the bottom right of the screen. So when you click on that little logo, you get the opportunity to subscribe to a web page, and whenever there's an update to that page, you are informed about it either in an email address or in your Google or your reader, of which Google is going to be the one that we recommend. So an RSS feed allows publishers to syndicate content automatically. It allows people to put it into different places and on their website so that people can subscribe. It's a standardized file format that allows the information to be published once and viewed by many different programs. Readers who subscribe benefit from timely updates from their favorite websites. RSS feeds can be read using software called an RSS reader or feed reader. And the user subscribes to a feed by clicking on the orange logo, which initiates the subscription process. The reader checks the user's subscribed feeds regularly for new work, downloads any updates, and provides an interface to monitor and read the feeds. RSS allows users to avoid manually checking every website they are interested in and instead have new content sent to them when it becomes available. So this is Google's Reader. It's a feed reader, an RSS feed reader. It's a free tool that Google provides. It's really, really easy. Gets going out the box, no problem to download it. You don't have to download software. You just log in with your Google Gmail address, and that will give you the opportunity to set up your Google Reader account. Once you do this, you'll need to find some content, and we're going to look at that in just a second. But if we just look at that little graphic on the right, you'll see that it looks very much like an email client, an email program. You've got the items up on the top there, 92 items there to be read. And down the left bottom side, you can see all the websites that have been subscribed to. So any time that any one of those websites is being updated, it will notify Google Reader, and the information will be displayed on the right hand side, and that's clickable, and it'll take you through not to an email but straight to a web page. So basically Google Reader, I would say, is an email client that will receive web copy for you to read just like you would read emails. And one of the things I would suggest you do, having set this up, is get the alerts set up so that it gives the information to you that you want to read, and then get in the habit when you do your emails each day of going into your Google Reader and just spending a little bit of time consuming this information, because that will then give you the opportunity to put that out onto your social media platforms, to put your content out there. But also it will upskill you in terms of learning more about what it is that you want to find out about. So you might not just want to look for information related to the products and services that you sell or provide, but you might want to upskill yourself in certain areas. So I might want to learn more about search engine optimization. So I want to find everything on the web that is to do with search engine optimization. And then that will send it to my reader, and I can read and update my skills accordingly. So how do we set up a Google Alert? Well, a Google Alert is literally what it says. It's an alert that tells me there's something new on the web about what I've asked Google to find. So I've set up here anything to do with newspapers in the UK. Anytime anything about the newspapers in the UK is mentioned, I want to know about it. And I want to, if you look on the left there, I want everything. Now that could be just blogs, it could be just videos, it could be web page updates, anything, but I want everything once a day, only the best results that people are looking at, and I want it sent to my Gmail address. So I can have that sent to my email account, or I can select my feed reader, which in this instance, as we've said, is Google Reader. And then you just hit the red button, Create Alert, and it will send you information into your Google Reader and populate that for you. And as you can see on the right hand side, it's already found 10 items ready for me to read on newspapers in the UK. You can set up Google Alerts for all kinds of things. Set it up for products and services related to what you do. Set it up for things that you want to learn more about. Set it up for things that you're interested in socially if you wish to do so, maybe for hobbies, for example, as well. But also set up a Google Alert for your company name, because most importantly, if anybody says anything, a la the TripAdvisor example mentioned earlier, if anybody says anything about your business, you want to know about it. So set up a Google Alert for your business and indeed your personal name, so that if anybody says anything about your business, or indeed you'll know about it through your Google Alerts. Very important to do. The keyword tool is exactly what we were saying a moment ago, gives us an idea of what it is that people are typing into Google to find your products and services. Real valuable tool, which is at the heart and centre of your marketing going forward, I would suggest. If you don't know what people are typing into Google to find your services, how can you optimise what you say and do on your website to match those needs? Very important. Google provides you with this free tool. It is situated within Google's program called AdWords. So if you type in Google Keyword Tool, as we've got on the screen there, you'll see it comes up as part of AdWords, or you can type in Google AdWords and it will find AdWords for you. The Keyword Tool is buried inside AdWords, but it's not too hard to find, you'll be pleased to hear. If you go along to the Tools and Analysis tab at the top, once you've logged in with your Gmail address once again, you can go down to Keyword Tool there, and then click on it, and that will open up a box and ask you to type in a phrase or a couple of words that you think are words that people are likely to type into Google. So it might be social media advisors in Berkshire, or it might be just social media. It might be any number of different things that you want to find out whether people are typing it into Google. Good example was an HR consultant that I was working with who wanted to find out what people were typing in around the words curriculum vitae or CV. He thought it would be curriculum vitae help or assistance or anything of that nature. One of the phrases he didn't bank on finding was CV template. And what he found was that many people were typing into Google CV template to try and find a skeleton, if you like, on which to base their CVs. So that enabled him, with that knowledge, to then produce a number of pieces of video and blog items to tell people what kind of template they needed to do their CV. So you can see how it will be quite useful intelligence for you, particularly if your competitors doesn't have this knowledge, to find out what it is that people are typing in so that you can optimize your posts, your website, your marketing copy, analog and online, I would suggest, to match the kind of words that people are typing into Google to find you. And here is an example. I've typed in social media, as you might expect, and I can see that it achieves, along the top, global monthly searches, over on the right hand side, 3.35 million searches per month, that is, across the world. And that subdivides down into 301,000 searches in the UK. So that's a lot of interest in social media in the UK, and clearly for me to be on the first page of Google with that amount of traffic would be unrealistic given the sort of budgets that I'm likely to have to try and optimize my SEO to be found in that way. So I don't want to be a small fish in a big pool. So what I'm trying to do is to try and find some of the alternatives that Google also provide down that left-hand side, because not only is it going to show me social media, it shows me all the other phrases that might be of relevance, that Google thinks might be of interest to me. And there you can see social media strategy, agency, academy optimization, marketing UK, and so on. And over on the right hand side you can see global monthly searches and also of course the UK searches. So what I'm trying to do is find something, if you like, that's a little mid-table. Something that might be around 5,000 to 6,000 searches a month, might be slightly less, that would be something that would be where I could be a little bit more visible in a smaller pool, if you like. Clearly, social media marketing, 27,100. Again, I'm not going to get myself realistically on the front page with that, so I'm going to look at something maybe more like, for example, social media strategy, for example, or I might be looking at social media management at 5,400. It would be quite easy for me to optimize my posts and web copy, for example, on my web pages, to use those phrases more consistently than I perhaps do at the moment, to get myself greater matches in Google's rankings to the search terms that people are putting in. So you can see how useful this tool is. The competition column, by the way, is not something that we're going to deal with particularly in this session. This is more for those doing pay-per-click advertising, and suggests the sort of prices that you're likely to pay for your pay-per-click, because the competition high, clearly you're going to have to pay for greater amounts to get to greater prominence on the page for pay-per-click advertising. But certainly in terms of understanding the phrases that are popular in searches, from a Google point of view, this is a great little tool, the keyword tool. And I suggest that you spend some time playing with this. You won't break it. Log in with your Google Gmail account. Once again, that's why it's so useful to have your Gmail account. Log in and just play with certain phrases that you think might be popular, and I'm sure you will be surprised as to what Google tells you people are typing in. And once you know that information, you can then use that to form your body copy on your website, in your leaflets, in your online marketing, on your landing pages, and so on and so forth. So that just about brings us to the end of Module 1. Let's just summarise then. Marketing has changed from interruptive to interactive. Technology is driving this change, and really fast. Social media does not replace traditional marketing. It's important that you complement the both. We've talked about the importance of strategy and the importance of content marketing and where to find that marketing content. We've talked about the rules of engagement and how you need to behave with honesty and integrity and be real. We've talked about your homework, which is setting up a Google Gmail account, setting up your Google Reader and some Google Alerts, and then consuming that information on a daily basis and getting used to logging in daily to see what it gives you. And I've asked you to investigate the Google keyword tool and try to establish some keywords that you might use in your business. Enjoy. I hope you've enjoyed that first session. The next module, we're going to be getting started with Twitter. Thanks for watching.